Joining me now, MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian, senior Washington editor at Semaphore, Ilana Shore, and MS Now legal analyst and former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Barbara McQuade. She's also the author of the new book, The Fix: Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. Barb, I'll start with you. It's all been a bit confusing to follow here. Is this fund dead, or is it being resurrected?
Well, Todd Blanche says so when he is pressed by members of Congress to say so. But I don't trust the word of this Justice Department as far as I can throw them. I think what we want to see is an official declaration. So, for example, if they get to court during a court hearing, we see Crew really pushing the issue to get a finding by a court and then perhaps an order dismissing it on the basis that it really is dead. Now, I think there is a possibility, based on what you just flagged, that President Trump is still a big proponent of this kind of fund, that they not rejigger it in some different fashion, right? That it's called something else, or it is recreated in a different form. I'll also point out that, to me, one of the most disturbing parts of the resolution wasn't the weaponization fund, the compensation fund, but Donald Trump's own immunization from a tax audit. How about that piece of it? And sometimes the most cynical side of me wonders if the weaponization fund wasn't just cover for this estimated $100 million tax gift that was given to Donald Trump. And so I think that piece of it remains very controversial.
Absolutely. Barb, quickly, though, can you also just break down for us what Crew is trying to accomplish in this lawsuit here?
Well, they want to challenge the viability of this fund. One of the things that they have argued, I think correctly, is that there was never any genuine case or controversy that existed in this case. And therefore, this weaponization fund is it's a fraud on the court. It's a non-existent a case for which there is court jurisdiction. They have identified some individuals they believe have standing to file this lawsuit who say they will be harmed by the administration of this. People who were former prosecutors, who prosecuted the January 6th defendants, for example, who, if this fund is allowed to stand, will themselves become the targets because it will advance that false narrative that these individuals were somehow victimized when, in fact, they themselves were the perpetrators. And so they've alleged some violations of the Administrative Procedure Act, that this fund was set up in a fashion that is arbitrary and violates those federal statutes. Of course, I think it could be resolved if the Justice Department vouches for the fact that this is going to be removed and becomes null and void. But it would be, I think, prudent for the judge to say the case could be refiled at any time if the Justice Department should resurrect it.
Ken, what are your sources telling you about this fund? Also, the president's sort of tax audit immunity piece here, as Barb, did a great job of just reminding people how alarming that is to so many Americans right now. It seems to me with all of this, the administration is keenly aware of how politically toxic it has become, but they are also looking for back channels, quieter ways to essentially get the same deal done.
Well, if you take it at face value, which is admittedly very hard to do here, what the Justice Department is saying is, we're not doing the fund. We've told you we're not doing the fund, but we want to argue our legal position in court because we think it was legal. We oppose what Crew and these other plaintiffs are saying, and so we want to vindicate our rights in court. But of course, given what Donald Trump has said about wanting to bring back the fund, or maybe there's some other way to do it, everyone is understandably skeptical about why they are arguing this way. And so there's not one but three separate lawsuits challenging this fund. And there's already a judge that's put it on hold temporarily. And she is actually also looking at this IRS deal that essentially holds the Trump family harmless from a potential $100 million tax penalty. So this is not going away. That's going to happen. These cases will be going on for some time, whether the Justice Department likes it or not. And you may end up having rulings from judges, stopping this fund altogether.
I want to bring one more person into this conversation, New York Times reporter who covers the Justice Department, Glenn Thrush. Glenn, good to have you. So you report in the Times that Blanche was once seen as tempering Trump. It's sort of one of those adult in the room stories in this administration. But he's all in now. Tell me about that.
Well, I think, as Ken was saying, there is such a almost anarchic sense that the president or someone in the White House can essentially order up stuff at the White House without necessarily the senior leadership knowing. Blanche has, I think, over the course of the past 6 weeks to 2 months since Pam Bondi got fired and he's been placed as acting attorney general, essentially just thrown off this mantle that a lot of people, including Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney, who was sacked for not granting Mel Gibson his gun rights. She said in a recent piece that initially career officials at the Justice Department thought Blanche, who was a former federal prosecutor, might normalize the situation and stand up to Donald Trump. That has not turned out to be the case, to say the very least. This is a guy who now owns the fact that he signed off on a prosecution of James Comey for a seashell photograph. He signed off, whether he participated in it directly or not, and he sought to distance himself. He signed off on this settlement fund, which is viewed as an abomination by Senate Republicans. Blanche is in for a dime and in for, $10 billion at this point in time on the settlement thing. So I think there is a general recalibration of people's opinions of Blanche. And there was an extraordinary interview with Blanche that Blanche gave to Sean Hannity of Fox a couple of days ago. Really, I would urge your viewers to take a look at it, in which Blanche kind of sheds this mask of reasonability and a sense that he was going to be a neutral arbiter. And he starts to use a lot of the same language that Ed Martin, the former head of the Weaponization Task Force, a guy who Blanche had ejected from Justice Department headquarters, started to use. Essentially saying that naming and shaming targets of investigations was a legitimate form of law enforcement, which flies completely, as Barb knows, in the face of DOJ's commitment to finding evidence that establishes criminality and then finding the criminal. So I think in order to get this job, Blanche has done things that might actually make it somewhat more difficult for him to be appointed permanent attorney general or confirmed as attorney general.
Ilana, can you give me your take on what his path ahead looks like and where that friction may come on the Republican side?
Yeah, I mean, it only takes one Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee to effectively bottle up Todd Blanche. And we don't have to look far to single out one Republican. Tom Tillis, retiring, doesn't owe the president anything. He did something very similar when it came to Kevin Warsh, and Jerome Powell said, you know what, you don't get my vote until this investigation into the Fed chair is done. And ultimately, the White House had to bow to Tillis. So it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Tillis stands in Blanche's way in exactly the same way. And for that matter, he isn't alone. There are a couple of other senators on the committee who also want to ask Blanche some pretty hard questions about why this fund isn't really dead.
Ken, 10 years from now, what do you think would worry people more? Having a precedent of sort of compensating your political allies in creative ways, or insulating a president and his family from tax issues?
Oh, I think the IRS audit issue will stand as the more dangerous and pernicious and disturbing aspect of this, because essentially this was Donald Trump making a deal with himself and absolving himself and his family from what a potential $100 million IRS penalty. These are IRS agents doing their job, trying to figure out whether Donald Trump took an improper tax deduction. This is an audit that's been going on for years. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump's former defense attorney, Todd Blanche, signs off on this deal. He doesn't even preside over the IRS. The IRS is part of the Treasury Department. So there's a lot of crazy questions that this thing raises.
Why then aren't we seeing more Republican pushback on it? Why isn't someone like Tillis, who, as Ilana just spelled out there, really doesn't have anything to lose anymore? He's about to move on.
My theory about that, it's only a theory, is that it was really offensive to regular people, the idea that January 6th violent felons could get some kind of taxpayer settlement. And they don't see this as the same kind of thing. They see this as Donald Trump's dispute with the IRS. Everyone hates the IRS. So it's just politically a little bit different. But really, people should see it as part of the same thing. It's all coming from the same taxpayer treasury, and this is potential illegal tax deductions that now the Trump family is held harmless on.
There's one other sort of strange piece of this story, Barb, that I believe Politico was reporting on. This figure, Patrick Davis, attempting to seek money from this very anti-weaponization fund that he worked on, something that apparently has alarmed colleagues at the DOJ. How abnormal is that for someone who was liaising with senators on this very fund to then indicate that he was hoping to raise his hand and ask for something from it?
It's completely unethical. The idea that as a government official, you are working on a project that could benefit you financially is an absolute conflict of interest. He never should have begun down this road if he intended to request his own claim, file his own claim. This is Patrick Davis, who worked for Chuck Grassley and claims that he was one of the people who had his phone records reviewed. First, let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with an investigator using the court process to obtain non-content information about phone records. It happens all the time. It is the way of establishing a conspiracy. He now claims that he's the victim of weaponization. Regardless of that, to file a claim in something that you worked on is an absolute conflict of interest. He should have been recused long ago. If he plans to file this, he most certainly would need to recuse going forward. But if this fund is now defunct, I think it just speaks volumes about the kind of character and ethical lapses that we have in this administration.